She sang in 10 languages. She performed for kings and presidents. Orson Welles called her the most exciting woman in the world. She became Catwoman. She became a CIA target. She was blacklisted from America for telling the truth to the most powerful woman in the country. And for her entire life, every single year of it, from a cotton plantation in South Carolina to a stage in Paris to a Christmas day in Connecticut, she did not know who her father was. Not because she had not looked, not because she had not asked, because the answer had been deliberately hidden from her, hidden in a legal document with a name blacked out, hidden behind a system that made it impossible for a black woman in the Jim Crow South to officially name a white man as the father of her child. The secret did not die with her in 2008. It survived in her DNA. And what that DNA now points toward changes everything about how you understand one of the most complicated, most extraordinary, and most deliberately mysterious women who ever stepped onto a stage. Before we dive in, comment where you are watching from and click subscribe. Start with the cotton plantation in North South Carolina. The year is 1927. On January 17th, a girl is born to a 14-year-old mother named Annie Mae Keith. Annie Mae is described in every record that survives as a sharecropper of African and Cherokee descent. She is barely a child herself. She is working land she does not own, in a state where the law does not protect her from anything, under conditions that the word poverty does not begin to describe. The baby born that January morning is visibly different from her mother. Light-skinned, red-haired, features that do not fit neatly into any of the racial categories that South Carolina in 1927 had organized its entire social and legal structure around. The father's name is not recorded, not publicly, not in any document that has ever been released intact. The birth certificate that was eventually located in 1997, 70 years after the fact by a group of students at Benedict College doing research on her behalf, had the father's identity blacked out, deliberately, as was standard practice in the Jim Crow South when the father of a black woman's child was white. He could not be named. Naming him would have crossed a line the legal system had constructed specifically to remain uncrossable. What the birth certificate confirmed was what Eartha Kitt had suspected and publicly acknowledged her entire life. Her father was white. Beyond that, who he was, what his name was, whether he knew about her, whether he ever thought about the child born on that plantation, remained sealed. She spent 81 years not knowing. She died on Christmas Day, 2008, still not knowing. Here is what Eartha Kitt did know, and what it cost her. She knew she did not belong. From the very beginning, in the most immediate and brutal way possible, her existence was structured around rejection. Her mother's boyfriend refused to accept a light-skinned child who looked white. Annie Mae Keith, 14 years old, destitute, with no resources and no legal standing, made the agonizing decision to leave her daughter behind. Eartha was taken in by a woman named Aunt Rosa. She was abused there. She slept by her own account in the crawl space under the house with the cats. Not metaphorically, literally in that crawl space. The children in the community taunted her. They called her a yellow girl. The word they actually used was uglier than that. She was neither black enough for one world nor white enough for the other. In the rigidly policed racial geography of the Jim Crow South, that made her nothing. It made her a problem to be managed. A child no community claimed. Both the black sharecropping community around her and the white world beyond it looked at her light skin and saw something inconvenient, something that should not have existed but did, because the system that produced her also required the pretense that she could not be produced. She picked cotton. She went hungry. She later told an interviewer that there were stretches when the family survived by digging edible roots and weeds from the ground. She said she was glad that version of herself, The child who survived on weeds and lived under the house was still a part of her, because that child, she said, was the one who got her onto the stage every night. When her mother, Annie Mae, died, Eartha was sent to Harlem to live with a relative named Eartha Kitt, a woman she later came to believe might have been her biological mother. So deep did the confusion about her origins run. In Harlem, she found a teacher who recognized her talent. She auditioned for the Katherine Dunham dance troupe at 15 and got in. She left. She did not look back. She went to Paris. She went to London. She learned French. She learned German. She eventually sang in 10 languages, including Turkish and Hebrew. She performed for Winston Churchill and Albert Einstein. Orson Welles cast her and called her the most exciting woman in the world. She came back to America and became a Broadway sensation, a recording star, a television icon, and she did all of it without knowing where she came from. In 1968, Eartha Kitt walked into a White House luncheon hosted by Lady Bird Johnson and spoke the truth about the Vietnam War to the most powerful room in the country. She said the young men of America were being sent to die for a war that was breaking their families and their communities. She said it clearly, without performance, without apology. The room was not ready for it. President Lyndon Johnson was furious. The CIA, which had been surveilling Eartha Kitt since 1956, 12 years before the White House incident, 12 years of monitoring an entertainer whose politics made powerful men nervous, produced a report on her that described her in terms so vicious and so personal that when the New York Times uncovered the file in 1975 and asked Kitt if they could publish portions of it, she said yes. She said she had nothing to be afraid of and nothing to hide. The language the CIA had used about her, she understood, said more about the men who wrote it than about the woman they were writing about. She was blacklisted. Her career in America essentially ended overnight. She went back to Europe. She performed for audiences in countries that did not punish women for telling the truth. She did not return to American stages until 1978, a decade later, welcomed back by a new president in a new political climate. She rebuilt. She always rebuilt. She had learned that capacity for rebuilding, for surviving, for continuing in the crawl space under the house. She had learned it while being called a yellow girl by children who did not know what she was. She had carried it across the Atlantic and back, and she never put it down. Every exile became a European tour. Every rejection became material. She turned the thing that had been used against her, her difference, her ambiguity, her refusal to fit, into the engine of the most distinctive career in mid-century entertainment. But the question she could never answer, the wound that never fully closed, was the one that had been present since January 17th, 1927. Who was the man on the other side of her origin? Here is what the genetic record can tell us, and what it points toward. Eartha Kitt's visible appearance told part of the story from the beginning. Light skin, red hair, features that placed her visibly outside the physical profile of a woman with purely West African and Cherokee ancestry. The European contribution to her genome was not traceable. It was substantial. Researchers and biographers who have examined her ancestry estimate that she was very close to half European, a reflection of a father who was, by every account, a white man. The autosomal DNA analysis, consistent with her known family background, places the European ancestry entering her bloodline in a single generation, her father's, not spread across multiple ancestors over multiple generations. One man, one encounter. Her mother was 14 years old. The man, by the account that has survived most consistently across multiple sources, including her own autobiographical writing, was connected to the plantation where her mother worked. She said so herself. In interviews and in her autobiography, Eartha Kitt described her origin as a pregnancy resulting from rape. She said the man was the son of the owner of the farm, where her mother had been a sharecropper. That is the account she carried and repeated throughout her life, not as a source of shame, as a fact about what had happened to her mother and to her. In 2013, 5 years after her death, a British biographer named John Williams published a book claiming to have identified the man. He named a local doctor, Daniel Sturkey, a white man whose own ancestry included Swiss German, English, German, Scottish, French, and Creek Native American heritage, placing him in the genetic category that could produce a daughter who resembled Eartha Kitt. Eartha's daughter, Kit McDonald Shapiro, disputed the claim. There was no DNA confirmation. The biographer's assertion rested on circumstantial evidence, geographic proximity, timing, and physical resemblance, not genetic testing that could close the question definitively. And so the mystery remained what it had always been, pointed at, partially illuminated, never resolved. Here is why the birth certificate matters as much as the DNA. When Eartha Kitt and her daughter finally obtained her birth certificate in 1997, they found what generations of black families in the American South had found when they went looking for the same answer. The father's name had been blacked out, not lost, not forgotten, blacked out. Someone had taken a pen or an instrument to that line and made it unreadable. This was not unusual. This was the procedure. In the Jim Crow South, when a black woman gave birth to a child whose father was white, the legal system did not permit her to name him. His race might be recorded, but his identity would not be. The law protected him. It protected the fiction that the races did not mix in ways that produced children. It protected the social order that depended on that fiction remaining intact. The result was a generation of black Americans, many generations in fact, who grew up not knowing their own origins, not because their mothers had hidden the truth out of shame, though shame was certainly a tool the system used against them, but because the legal structure of the country had physically removed the answer from the document and left a black mark where a name should have been. Eartha Kitt saw that black mark in 1997. She was 70 years old. She had lived her entire life in the absence of that name, and seeing the mark did not provide the answer. It only confirmed in permanent ink what she had always known, that the answer had been taken from her deliberately. Now we reach what DNA applied to this story actually reveals. There is no confirmed genetic test result for Eartha Kitt herself in the way that Whoopi Goldberg participated in a DNA documentary. She died in 2008, before that kind of genealogical genetic analysis became widely accessible to the public. Her daughter, Kit McDonald Shapiro, has continued to seek answers about her mother's paternal origins, and those answers have not arrived in any definitive form. But the genetic logic of her story is not a mystery. It is, in fact, one of the clearest examples in the modern record of what DNA science has confirmed across millions of African American families. Clear. Her mother was of African and Cherokee descent. The Cherokee ancestry is itself a complex piece of her heritage, a Native American people who were displaced from the American Southeast, whose communities in South Carolina had been decimated by colonization and forced removal, and whose women had been subject to the same structures of vulnerability and coercion that African American women faced in the plantation economy. Annie Mae Keith carried both of those histories in her body. She was 14 years old when she was assaulted. She was destitute and without legal protection. Whatever she understood about what had happened to her, she carried it alone. Her father was, by her own account and all available evidence, a white man with predominantly European ancestry. The genetic result of that combination was a woman who appeared visibly mixed race in a society that had organized its entire legal structure around the premise that races did not mix. She was, in the language of the era, a yellow girl. That phrase and the rejection it encoded shaped her entire life. The 2013 biography naming Dr. Daniel Sturkey as the likely father brought this into sharper focus. Sturkey's documented ancestry included Swiss German, English, German, Scottish, French, and Creek Native American heritage. If the claim is accurate and it has not been confirmed by DNA, then Eartha Kitt's genome would have combined West African ancestry, Cherokee ancestry, and a specifically European mixture of Germanic, British, and French lineage. That combination would produce exactly the features that made her an outsider in South Carolina and an icon in Paris. The result was Eartha Kitt, a woman who was visibly mixed, who belonged completely to no single racial category, who was rejected by both communities her biology crossed, and who spent her entire life building an identity out of the materials that rejection left her. That identity, the purr, the wit, the ferocity, the refusal to be contained by any stage or any country or any system, was not inherited from any traceable ancestor. It was constructed under pressure. It was chosen in the dark. It was the only thing about herself that Eartha Kitt built entirely on her own terms, from the ground up, starting in a crawl space in South Carolina with nothing. DNA tells us what she came from. It cannot tell us how she became what she became. Here's what the genetic record cannot answer, and what it leaves open. The man who fathered Eartha Kitt lived the rest of his life in South Carolina. Whether he knew about her, whether he was aware that a child existed, that she was growing up in a crawl space, that she was being called ugly names by children in the community for the skin color he gave her, is unknown. Whether he cared is unknown. Whether his name appears anywhere in a record that might one day be matched against a DNA database is unknown. What is known is this: he produced a daughter who became one of the most recorded voices of the 20th century, a daughter who sang in 10 languages, who performed at the Paris Opera, on Broadway, in Las Vegas, and at Carnegie Hall, who stood in the White House and told the truth when telling the truth cost everything, who was monitored by the CIA for more than a decade because powerful men found her dangerous, who came back from exile and filled Carnegie Hall again, who kept performing until April 2008, 8 months before her death, at the Cheltenham Jazz Festival in England. Her voice was still extraordinary, her presence still electric, her origin still unknown. He produced a daughter who did not know his name, and she built everything she ever was without it. That is the final irony that DNA science places in front of us. The anonymous man whose European bloodline is encoded in every cell of Eartha Kitt's body, whose genetic contribution is the reason she looked the way she looked, was rejected the way she was rejected, was forced to build an identity from scratch because no community would hand her one, contributed to the creation of something he could never have imagined and never knew existed. The question the science opens and cannot close is this: what is OWA to a person when the record of their origin is deliberately destroyed, when the law itself takes the pen and blacks out the name, when an entire system conspires to ensure that a child will never know where she came from, and that child spends 81 years performing and surviving and building and searching and never finds the answer, when the child becomes one of the most celebrated entertainers of her century and still does not find the answer, when she dies on Christmas Day, still not knowing, and the question passes to her daughter, who is also still looking. Is there a name for what that is? Eartha Kitt would probably say there is. She would say it in French or Turkish or whichever language made it land hardest. She had 10 to choose from. Drop your answer in the comments, because this story does not close, it only deepens. If this moved you, share it. And if you want to know what DNA revealed about another icon who carried a hidden origin story into the spotlight and never let it show, the next video is already waiting.